Okay, this episode is a really special one because it's personal. It's not just a conversation about therapy or healing, it's a conversation with the woman who walked alongside me through one of the hardest seasons of my life. Alissa is a licensed therapist, a wife, a mom of 3 girls, and the founder of Mercies Counseling, a faith-based practice rooted in compassion, truth, and hope. She's someone who has always felt called to help others, but that calling has shaped and deepened through her own experiences of deep personal pain. From being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at a young age to experiencing multiple miscarriages to watching her husband battle a debilitating illness that turned their world upside down, Alissa has lived the kind of pain that shapes how she now holds space for others. And I can say firsthand, because she's my therapist, that she's held that space for me. Over the last 6 months, she's helped me navigate grief and trauma from losing my niece, the emotional weight of my stepdad's double organ transplant, and the way those experiences completely overwhelmed my nervous system. She's also the person who introduced me to something called A.R.T. I'll be honest, I thought A.R.T. was only for people with major trauma, but it helped me so much more than I expected. Grief, anxiety, even in my marriage. It helped me separate the facts from the feelings and then layer truth over both. And that has been life-changing. So today, we're talking about all of it. Her story, my story, what art really is, and how God meets us right in the middle of the mess. This isn't just about therapy. It's about redemption, restoration, and the kind of healing that only comes when we let go of perfection and lean into grace. So let's dive in. Hey friend, I'm Jessica, and this is With My Whole Heart. I'm a real-life woman juggling a lot of real-life things, raising girls, running a hair salon, chasing big dreams, and doing my best to stay grounded through it all. If you've ever found yourself in the thick of it, somewhere between who you've been and who you're becoming, this space is for you. Here, we talk about the middle, the messy, meaningful, beautiful middle. The big leaps, the small wins, the hard lessons, and the heart-led pivots. From business and beauty to faith, motherhood, and everything in between, nothing's off limits. So grab your coffee or your tea, get cozy, and let's dive in. Because this journey, we're walking it together with our whole hearts. Alissa, I am so glad you're here. You already know how much this conversation means to me because you've been a big part of my healing these last 6 months. So let's start simple. Before we get into your work as a therapist, I'd love to know what first stirred your heart towards helping people.
I've always been really had a compassion for people, but I can specifically remember I was like 12 or 13 years old, and I can't remember the exact episode, but I was watching Texas Walker with my parents, and
That's funny.
I remember seeing like all these kids having to go into a group home, and I told my parents after that, like, I'm gonna help kids someday. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to help kids. And I didn't know what capacity that even looked like. And actually, at 12 or 13 years old, I started like taking out my rulers and drawing up these plans of this
Stop.
house
That's
that
so
I was going to
cool.
make and build someday. And it had 12 beds in it, and I had the bedrooms all decorated. And I was like trying to think of all the things I wanted to give these kids. And so when it got to the time to go to college, I knew like, I don't know exactly what this looks like. I don't know what God has for my future, but I really know like I want to be prepared to help people. So I went into youth ministry in counseling at Bible college.
That is so cool. Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah.
Who'da thunk?
Yeah.
Hey, I grew up watching that show too. I loved it. Okay, so I know we're going to get into some of your story today, and parts of it are heavy, but I think it's so important for people to know that you're not just someone who holds space for others. You've actually walked through a lot yourself. So can you share a little bit about that season when you were diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and how that shifted your life?
hmm So around when I was probably 21, 22, I started getting a lot of pain in my body. And I just remember telling my mom, oh my gosh, I know you guys told me like getting old is painful, but I had no idea it was like this.
And you were
And
what, 22?
yeah.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I just kept pushing through. At that point, I didn't have insurance. So I'm like, I can't go to the doctor, kept putting it off. And by the time I was 27, it was like I couldn't walk on my left leg anymore. And so I had moved back up here. And so I went to Essentia and they put me in a boot cast and they're like, oh, it's because you like running. And I was like, well, I run out like a 5K. Like I'm not a runner. And so I searched, got a second opinion, and immediately he did all my blood work. And he's like, I don't want to tell you this, but you have rheumatoid arthritis. And at that point, I had no idea what is it. Obviously, I found out it's an autoimmune disease that attacks your joints. Within the next probably year, we went through a lot of changes. Like I was planning on getting married in 6 months. We knew we wanted to have kids right away because I didn't get married till I was later. And the medications that they put you on, you can't have kids because the birth defect rate is so high. So then we were in this place of like, well, are we having kids? Are we not having kids? Am I going on medications? And my husband and I, or my fiance at the time, we prayed about it and we're just like, let's ask the doctor to give us 6 months to like totally revamp our life. Like we revamped our diets, stress levels, sleeps, chemicals that we were using, everything. We flipped it. And he was like, it's not going to matter. It's not going to do anything. You have to be on medication. But I really knew, and we both knew we wanted kids. And so we said, just give us 6 months. If nothing changes in 6 months, I'll be on the medication, and that's God's plan that we probably just won't be having kids. And we went back 6 months later, and my inflammation, my rates in my body had dropped 50 points. And so it was considered, it was in a normal range. And he's like, whoa, this never happens. Like people aren't able to do this. And so we just took that as like, okay, God's working, and I'm going to continue doing this through when we have kids. And so actually I did it all natural for about 12 years.
That's wild.
And then when my husband got sick, the stress levels obviously escalated and lots of stuff went on. And then I did go on medications, and I'm on medication currently. But our goal was let's have kids. And we were able to do that.
That's so cool. I didn't know that. That's wild. So you self-healed, not self, obviously God had a part of it, but just through natural. Wow. Very, very cool. Okay, so you told me before that the stress and living in go mode really impacted your health. That hit home for me too, because I didn't even realize how much my nervous system had been living in fight or flight until it all caught up with me. So you touched on that a little bit, like when more stuff, your arthritis, it started to flare up again. So what did you begin to learn about rest, boundaries, or surrender during that time?
I think I'd always been like, found my worth in like being able to make people happy. Like that made me feel happy. So I felt like, well, let's just keep going with that. So I said yes to everything, even if it meant saying no to me, even if it meant saying no to, I don't have time to sleep. I don't even have time to eat. I'm living off coffee because I don't have time to make a meal. And realizing like, yes, we can care and be so compassionate about people. And yet God also wants us to take care of our own bodies. And I wasn't doing that. I wasn't taking the time to sleep. I wasn't taking the time to eat healthy or exercise. And so during that season, when I got diagnosed with RA, it really was a time like I stepped back from all my ministries in the church. I stepped back from doing events. I stepped back from parties, everything. And we just really focused on like, how do I eat better? How do I sleep better? How do we just focus on healing my body? And God knew what he was doing when he gave me my husband, because my husband is really good at setting boundaries, and he's really good at just being like, that doesn't sound like that would be really helpful right now. That sounds like that's going to stress you out. And he was really good. Like we changed everything about our diet. Like I was a meat and potatoes girl, and they were like, you need to cut out carbs and gluten, and you have to do really low meat intake, and you can't have sugar, and you can't do caffeine. And so he's like searching the internet and going through cookbooks and finding things that we could cook together. And as I'm crying in tears, like, I hate this. Like, I want to eat what I used to eat. He's like, we got this. Like, we're going to figure it out.
So he did it alongside you.
He did it right alongside me when I was needing sleep. He was like, okay, let's go to bed early. You need sleep, you know? And being the person also to support me and being able to learn how to say no, because I wasn't good.
Because he had no problem with that.
Saying no. Yeah.
He's like, I have no problem saying no.
Yeah.
I'll say no for you. That's awesome. Okay. So let's see. You also went through multiple miscarriages.
Mm-hmm.
And then not long after, your husband became seriously ill.
Yeah.
I know we'll never fully be able to summarize the weight of that season in one podcast, but I do want to ask, what was your relationship with God like during those years? Were there moments where you questioned him
Yeah.
or felt held in ways you didn't expect? Because I feel like a lot of times when we go through hardships, it's kind of like you're faced
Yep.
with okay, am I going to trust him? Am I mad at him? Right? Like,
Yep.
how did you feel in that season?
I would say initially going through all of that, I had a lot of anger. Like, God,
Mhm.
why did you give me these 3 babies just to take them away that I didn't get to meet them or see them grow up?
Mhm.
And even when my husband got sick, being like, I was a stay-at-home mom. Like, I kind of had my dream life at that point. Like, this is what I wanted. I wanted to stay home with my babies and
Yeah.
I wanted to raise them. And suddenly he got severe Lyme's disease that traveled to his brain, and he wasn't able to often walk or even talk. So he was not able to
Mm.
provide anymore by going to work. And so it was like this hard thing of like, God, what are you doing with our life? Like, you gave us all these dreams, you gave us all these aspirations. And part of me was even bitter at the point of like, why did you let us have kids if I don't even get to be home to raise my kids? Like, this was what
Mhm.
I wanted to do. And processing through all of that and realizing like God does have a plan even through the hardships. And there were times where I felt like telling my friends, like, I can't even pray right now. So I need you to pray for me because I'm so frustrated. I'm so angry.
Right.
And God did walk through that with us. And now on the other side of that, my husband obviously is not totally healed. And yet I can see how God worked
Yeah.
through all of those times. And I can see like, our journey doesn't have to look exactly like we planned. God
Mhm.
still is good. He's still faithful. And oftentimes, the dreams He has for us are so much bigger than what I could have even dreamed for my own family.
Right. Yeah. It
Mhm.
ends up being even better
Yeah.
than you could have expected.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Okay. Yeah. And yet God still, he shows up
Yep.
every single time. You shared a few stories with me that stopped me in my tracks, like the time your electric bill somehow had an $800 credit when you hadn't been able to pay it in months. I've heard that story a couple times from you, and every time I'm like, it's just crazy. Like,
Yep.
you literally hadn't paid it.
Yep.
You knew the electricity was going to be getting shut off,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
So moments like that, they don't make sense on paper, but they're the kind that remind us how faithful God is, even when everything feels impossible. So can you share a few of those moments that reminded you that God was still providing and he was still near, even though it was really, really difficult?
Yep. Um, there's so many that it's kind of crazy, like, to look back, and I actually praise God for all the times that I can share with my kids, like, look what God did in our life, like, I
Mhm.
don't even know the amount of times when I was in grad school and he was sick, so he wasn't working, and his medical bills were probably like 3,000 a month, and
Ooh.
I was in grad school and he wasn't working, and so I'd be like, "I don't even know how we're paying our mortgage,"
Mhm.
and he'd be like, "I don't know how we're paying it either," and I'd go out to the mailbox and there'd be a check there from someone that I probably haven't talked to in 10 or 15 years, you know, and other times our church had asked us one year, "We know you guys probably can't buy Christmas presents for the kids. Why don't you just send a list?" And I just felt embarrassed by the whole thing. So
Mhm.
I told my kids, like, write a list and give it to them. Like, I don't even want to see it. Like, I'm so embarrassed that this is where we're at, that we can't even buy our kids Christmas presents.
Right.
And our church showed up right before Christmas and they had gotten every single thing that my kids had put on the list. And I'm like, I'm so embarrassed that they put that much stuff on the
You're
list.
like, I should have looked at those
Yeah.
lists.
And like every single thing was there, and the kids were so excited, and things that they didn't even know we needed. Like, we needed a vacuum, and I didn't put that on the list, and they showed up with a vacuum, and
It's so
we,
beautiful.
needed a cabinet, and they had cabinets and all of the things. And there's just so many times where I'm like, where did the money even come from? Like, honestly, I look at our taxes from those 2 years of what we made for 2 years, and we made less than our mortgage actually was for a year. And so I'm like, so how did our mortgage actually
Get
get paid?
paid.
And
And the
that's not counting
electricity.
electricity, car, insurance,
Food.
like all the things. And so it's like God does own
Mm.
everything. And we talk about he cares about the birds and the flowers. Like, obviously, how much more does he care for us? He does
Mhm.
show up, he does provide.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so cool. As a child, we once had our church community as well. My mom was, I don't know if she was in nursing school. She might have already been done, but my dad wasn't working. He was on and off working throughout my life, but
Yep,
where the church came and surprised us with presents. And it's a faint memory. It's just something
yep,
that it's like, because I must have been really young, but I can remember there is a little bit, and it's so sad, like, not an embarrassment, but it humbles you.
yep.
But it's a
Mhm.
beautiful
Yeah.
humbling,
Yep.
right? To have the
Mhm.
community come and surround you and, like, support you like that. That's what community's for. That's what family's for.
Yep.
And if you can't get that out of your community, like,
Yep. And
that's
even to share with their kids, like, they can't understand God all the time. They can't physically
mm-mm.
see him. So they're asking questions and they're trying to understand that and being able to point out, like, God provided that.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't know that. God didn't,
Mhm.
the electric company obviously didn't know we needed our electric bill paid. God provided that. Like,
Yeah.
our mortgage is paid. We have a gas card from someone when we needed gas to get to school, like all of those things. And
That's so
how
cool.
I just pray that God uses that to grow
Mhm.
their faith.
Oh, for sure. They'll
Mhm.
always remember that.
Yep.
I mean, I remember it, and
Yep.
I was so, so little. It's just like a
Yep.
small little glimmer of a memory. That's
Mhm.
so cool. All right. So, in the middle of all of that, raising babies, walking through health issues, not only for yourself, but your husband as well, navigating financial uncertainty, you decide to go back to school. That's huge. So, what made you finally say, I'm going to become a therapist now? And did you feel like God was calling you into that, or were you just surviving at that point and felt like desperate, like, I need to do something?
Yep. So actually the year before my husband got sick, we had been talking about the idea of me going back to school. We're like, maybe we go back part-time, or what does that look like? I don't really need a full-time job, but I'd like to get out a couple days a week and I'm really passionate about therapy. And so the goal wasn't to work full-time, and it just kind of ended up being like the fall that I started grad school was also the fall that he ended up getting really, really sick. And so then we transitioned over into like, I need to do this full time. I need to be able to, provide for my family at this point because he's too ill to do that. And
Sure.
so I feel like God just worked all of those things out. Like we already had it in our head that we wanted to go that direction just as a part time thing. And God just provided.
Yeah. He's
Hmm.
like, this is what's happening.
Yep. Yep.
That's so cool. Now you run New Mercies Counseling. And I just want to pause and say, what a perfect name.
Yep.
So I'd love for you to tell us what New Mercies means to you personally. How did you come up with the name, and like, what is the story behind it?
Yep. So I chose that out of the verse in Lamentations that says, His new mercies are new every
Mm,
morning. And for me, that just looks like every day there are things happening in our world, in trials in our life. And who do we lean on to get through those things? Who can we count on? Who can we talk to? And even if today is really, really hard, God is going to give us new mercies tomorrow. And He's just waiting for us to turn to Him and be like, God, carry me through this because I
mhm.
can't do it by myself.
Right.
And so that was just a really passionate verse for me. Like I just really connected with it because I've seen God do that over and over through the tears and through all the hard things. And yet that season doesn't last forever. Like God
Yeah.
shows up and He gives you grace to get through.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So did you know right off the bat that that's what you wanted to name it, or was it kind of a process?
I thought about it for like a couple months and I could not come up with a single name. And
Yeah.
then the day that I was reading through my Bible and I saw that, I was like, that's the name.
Oh,
And that
that's
was it.
so fun. That's kind of how it happened for me for
Yeah.
this podcast name. And Asher can attest. Like and I'm like, I don't feel connected to this name. I had a
Yeah.
list of names and none of them felt right. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm running out of time.
Yeah.
I need to come up with a name. And then, yeah, that's just so cool. And then it came
Mhm.
up and I'm like, that's it. I just
Yep.
know that's it. That's so cool. All right. So Let's talk about ART.
Yep.
Okay, because this has been so transformational for me, and I want other women to understand what it is. So, can you walk us through what ART, which I believe stands for, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I am not a therapist, Accelerated Resolution Therapy?
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
you are.
How it works and what kind of healing it can unlock.
Yep. So, accelerated resolution therapy came out of EMDR. So, a lot of people have heard of EMDR. They haven't necessarily heard of ART, as that is kind of like a newer kind of EMDR. But ART has this built into it, like the body sensations. So we're calming your body sensations as we go. And so a lot of times why we react to certain sensations or certain situations is because our body reacts the same way as it did the first time that it ever happened in our life.
Yes.
So then we don't even realize it. Like we're getting really triggered and upset by something. Well, normally our heart starts racing or our neck gets really tight or we start curling up or whatever. And then when that situation happens again, we don't even realize our body is doing that, and then we respond the same way. So it's working at rewiring our brain to be like, oh, I can see that this trauma or this anxiety or this thing happened in the past, but my body doesn't have to respond the same way. Like I don't have to have that strong body sensation. Like I can relax my body. I can see that happened in the past, but I don't have to react to it right now. And oftentimes people get nervous because they're like, well, I don't want to relive those memories. Like that was like a really hard time. But we often don't realize we're like reliving it all the time. Like it's coming up in our dreams or it's coming up when we start daydreaming. And so it's like if we can process through it with ART and desensitize that and calm down our body, we don't have to have those thoughts coming up all the time. And we can see them. We can see them in our past. It's not like they disappear.
Right.
So some people are worried like, well, I don't want to like lose that. Like that was a part of my life. Well, we're not losing the memory. It's just desensitizing the memory.
Like the reaction.
And replacing, you know?
It's just so cool because when I honestly, in the beginning, I'm like, I don't know if this is, it felt a little like, how is this actually going to work? But it really is like rewiring your neural pathways.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's just wild how it works. And I want you to explain kind of how you explained it to me my first time about how when you go on a walk or you exercise.
Yep. So when you go on a walk, that creates bilateral stimulation in your brain. Bilateral stimulation naturally calms down your nervous system. So when you're doing ART or EMDR, you're following a light bar back and forth. So your eyes are like replicating that bilateral stimulation like when you're taking a walk. So it's calming down your nervous system while you're thinking of this past traumatic memory or past grief or whatever anxiety that's happening. So you're able to keep your nervous system regulated while you're going through those difficult memories to desensitize them.
Yeah. Which is, it's mind-boggling that it works because it does work. And I'm very I'm not a cynical person. But I'm somebody who watches and learns before I'll like jump into something. And I had a friend who had experienced it and she's like, Jessica, like it really is awesome. And I'm like, okay, because I had some trauma and some PTSD and things from my life that just, it kept showing up, right? And I had never experienced anxiety until I experienced anxiety, which wasn't until like 2 years ago. And so I was starting to notice that pattern that like when I had that trauma response or that trigger, my body would start to do the same thing. And it was always gut health. Like I would get sick to my stomach. Then I would feel physically ill. And then I would have to sleep because it felt like I just ran a marathon. And it was like this cycle. And I have to say like ART, it really helped. Like I haven't, knock on wood, had that kind of response since I started that therapy, which is crazy. Not that I haven't had anxiety. I've still had it where it creeps up and it comes back, but I'm able to like calm it.
And oftentimes there's so many lies that we're believing along with those body sensations. So being able to identify what are the lies that I have taken from all these different places of my life. And they maybe aren't things that people even meant, but as a kid, you took them a certain way and you've believed about your own worth or about your future or your abilities, and being able to change those lies into like, what are the truths that God says about your life? Like, what does God actually say about your worth and your value and his faithfulness.
Yeah. Because one thing, and it sounds hokey a little bit, right?
Yep.
But you are reliving, and it's not one thing I want to be clear is when you're doing this ART therapy, it's not like you're verbally saying the story out loud.
Yes.
At first, I thought that's what it was going to have to be. Like, I have to like relive it by like speaking it out loud. That never once have I had to tell you what my story is.
No.
So it's you're reliving it in your mind while you're watching the light.
Yep.
And you're asking questions like on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yep.
How are you feeling?
Yep.
And then you slow it down and then you start layering. It's like in your mind, you start layering and wallpapering and painting. And it's like, it seems really weird, but it makes so much sense while you're doing it. And like you're erasing it in your mind with the light. And talk a little bit more about like that, like what happens in it.
Yep. It literally is like rewiring, like kind of desensitizing what was there. And because your body is so much more regulated because of the bilateral stimulation, you're able to start seeing things that happened or didn't happen or how your body was reacting and being able to be like, wait, maybe that's not what was really happening there. Like my body responded really strongly. But maybe that's not what they meant when they said that, or maybe that's not what was supposed to happen, and like things that you read into. And I know for one of the first times I did it, the memory that actually came up was my kindergarten teacher telling me I needed to learn to read better. Well, as a kid, I got really upset by that. And I carried that my whole life until I did ART, thinking like I'm not smart enough. I can't read good enough. I am going to fail at everything. And going back, when I was able to reprocess that and kind of look through that through a different lens, I was like, wait, my kindergarten teacher was trying to encourage me to read better and read more. She wasn't trying to mean it as like, you're bad at this, but I couldn't see that as a kid. So that lie that I believed that I thought, she put there, that's not even what she meant.
No.
But you weren't able to see that without being able to slow that down and see it kind of as that movie screen as you're going through it with the light.
Because you're playing it out as a movie almost. Like a visualization, like a movie in your mind. That is so interesting. So it's like a childhood affirmation that you carry through your entire life. And when you went into your ART therapy session, did you know that's the idea you wanted to work on, or did that come up through the experience of ART?
That came up through the experience. That was actually when I was taking my licensing exam. I was having such a hard time studying. Like I could not focus. I'd never experienced that kind of anxiety before. And so I went in and did ART with a friend of mine that's also a therapist. And she was like, well, let's do a scene match to see when have you felt like this before. And that kindergarten memory is what came up. And when I processed through that memory of being like, no, that isn't truth, that lie that I believed that I am not smart enough, I can't do things, I can't remember things, that was a lie that I've been believing. And what does God say about me and my future and what he's given me? And obviously he has got me all the way through school. Like I can do this, but I couldn't see that part of it because I so strongly connected to that negative belief.
It's just wild. Hey friend, real quick before we dive back in, if you've been nodding along, tearing up, or laughing with me in these episodes, can I ask you a little favor? Make sure you've subscribed to With My Whole Heart so you never miss an episode. And if you've got a second, leaving a review helps so much. It's like giving the podcast a little hug. And hey, if something hit home or you just want to share your story, come DM me on Instagram. I seriously love chatting with you and hearing what's on your heart. This space was built to be a soft landing and a strong launch pad. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, so this is one thing too. So when I first started ART, I thought it was just for trauma, like capital T trauma, like massive, like for me, like the first things I worked on, and I'm totally open talking about this, is the fear of death, just because I had experienced it so much. And I didn't know where it was coming from because it takes you, like, I just knew I was scared of death. But why? It took me going through ART to see where that first initial inception of the idea, which was actually seeing my grandma passed away. And so I had to go all the way back from then and then kind of live through all of that up till today's date. But I thought that ART was for big traumatic events like that until our last session. And you helped me use it to work through grief, obviously, with the passing of my niece and through some old lies that I had internalized with the death of my grandma and a lot of other family members. But I used ART within the relationship of my marriage. So can we talk a little bit about that and how ART can help people rewire thought patterns even in relationships? So it's not like this idea always of like, oh my gosh, I experienced this deep, dark trauma. It can literally be me and my husband are not getting along. And these are the things that are bothering me. So if you can walk us through how it can help rewire thought patterns within relationships as well.
So oftentimes when you go through those scenarios, say the scenario you have with your husband and you're having these disagreements and you guys are clashing and you go through that scene, it kind of slows it down and you're able to see your side of it and you're able to see his side of it. And oftentimes in that process with the bilateral stimulation, it is bringing up like empathy towards your spouse.
It does.
Oh, maybe that's not what he meant when he said that, or maybe it's because of this, or maybe that thing that I told him was really hurtful. Like it just brings up very different viewpoints. By being able to calm your nervous system, you're not reacting out of your feelings. Like when you're in that argument with your spouse, you're having these really big responses because your feelings are bubbling up and your emotions and you're getting frustrated. But when you're able to calm that down and just look through the scene more logically, oftentimes it's able to be like, oh, wait, that isn't really what was happening here. Or I can have some grace for that. Or I can see it from a different perspective. Or I can see that actually was totally a trigger from my childhood and had nothing at all to do with him at all. You know?
And that was a lot of mine. It was childhood triggers that I was projecting onto my husband. Because if he did a certain thing, it triggered that response of like, well, that's what my dad did. Do you know what I mean? So then you start to almost like connect my husband to my dad from my childhood, and it's crazy. And so with that ART, one thing that I appreciate that you do, because I have seen other, and I don't know, ART is new to me, but I had heard of EDMR and all of that, and how a lot of times therapists will be like, and I know that you will change it depending on the person's comfortability. But think of a happy scene. Think of a beach. Where are you happiest? And that's beautiful and fine. But as a spiritual person, as a Christian, that can be really difficult because it is like, okay, the passing of my niece. Like I could do all of this work and have this happy, pretty scene, but the reality is she's still gone. So talk a little bit about how you do that.
So for me too, I've had a lot of people, and even for myself, I didn't connect well to just changing the scene to be something happy and cheerful, because that feels really great when you're in the session. And then when you go out and you realize like, well, my aunt is still not alive, you know, I still have to live with that. And now like we've tried to plaster over like this beach scene, or like, well, I still had that argument with my husband, you know, like it doesn't necessarily just make that disappear. And so being able to change that, and oftentimes when I'm doing those scenes, like changing your good scene to be like, well, what does God call us to in the future? And what hope does God have for us? And what does that look like? Instead of going back and changing that scene to just be like, it's sunshine and roses and everything's fine. Well, no, some things are really hard. Maybe the abuse in someone's past that they went through, you can't make that be sunshine and roses. So it's like looking back and being able to see that and see like that was wrong and that was sinful and that wasn't my fault. But we don't necessarily have to get rid of all of that. We can be like, and God used even those hard parts of my life to get me where I need to be in the future, you know, and to make me be able to be a person that can help other people in the future and put those hopeful scenes, like those future scenes.
It's attaching biblical truth, factual truth to that trauma. Yeah. I loved that. I thought that was really, really cool. And I truly think that made it for me.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people actually that have said, like, I've done ART. It didn't really resonate with me because I left and I felt like, well, I still lived through that trauma
Mhm.
and that trauma is still very real, even though I
Yes.
felt better in the session. And
Yes.
so then they did come and we did work through it a little bit differently
Yes.
because they wanted that ending, that hopeful.
Right.
Like there
Yeah.
there is hope even through the hard.
There is. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful practice, honestly. So you help me to separate the facts from the feelings and then layer truth over both. So we kind of talked a little bit about that.
Yep.
That process honestly changed so much for me. So when you're stuck in your own head, it's so easy to believe the lies and have those lies feel real, but aren't actually true.
Mhm.
So what is the kind of reframe? Why is that kind of reframing so powerful when it comes to healing or even just staying grounded in our relationships?
Mhm. I think oftentimes what we hear in our world and everywhere around us is like, follow your heart, follow your feelings, do all these things. But our feelings aren't always truth. Like our feelings are often really strong emotional reactions from things that have happened earlier in our life.
Mhm.
So being able to, I know a mentor of mine had told me, think right, do right, and eventually you'll feel right. But how do we get our thoughts and our actions first? And our feelings are going to come along.
Yes.
But you're not always going to feel good when a loved one just passed away or when you're finishing an argument, but you still have to do the right thing. What is the next step? Like sometimes you're not going to feel like getting out of bed in the morning and you're like, and I know my kids need to go to school and have breakfast. You
Mhm.
have to do the right thing and eventually your feelings are going to come.
Catch up.
And so that's kind of that same in ART. It's like, how do we start changing to get past those strong emotions, those strong feelings that are coming up and rewire to what is right? What do we have to do? And then we can work at changing those feelings.
Yes. Oh, such a good response. So good. I'm taking that one with me. Okay. And I have to ask because I think people wonder, as a therapist, do you go to therapy yourself? And what has that looked like for you while also supporting others through so much? Because I try to put myself in your shoes.
Yep.
And I just like, even like the trauma dumping I've done, just me. And I'm like, this is what you do all day, every day. So, A, do you go to therapy and how do you process all of this?
Yep. I have went to therapy in the past and I go when I need to. I'm not currently with a therapist. I kind
Sure.
of go on and off when I feel like I
Hmm.
need to. I've done ART with other therapists. I also can do ART on myself because
Yes.
I've done it so much. Like I'm able to do that. So I have done that too.
Hmm.
But I feel like part of it is also God's grace,
Hmm.
and God walks us through and like how do we show up in people's lives and also be able to be like, and God still has this for them. Like this isn't my job to carry it for them.
Hmm.
My job is to show up and to be here and support them and guide them and love them as best I can. And it's not my job to fix it for them. Like God is the only person that
Hmm.
can fix it for them. And
Right.
that I think through part of my journey has been really helpful because I would say if you would have asked me that 10 years ago, I would have been carrying every single one of my
Right.
clients' stuff and would not be able to do this. But going through my own stuff, I realized I can't even carry my own stuff. Like
No.
God is carrying me
Hmm.
every day. And so how do I just let that be and let God take care of it?
Yeah, that's such a
Mhm.
good point because being a hairstylist is kind of like being a therapist.
Yeah.
So I tell my stylist because it is one person celebrating they are pregnant.
Yep.
The next person's mourning because they lost their mom.
Yep.
The next person's going through divorce.
Yep.
Next person just got a new puppy. The
Yep.
next person, it's just up, down, up, down. Sometimes you see 8 to 10 people in a day as a
Yeah.
hairstylist, and it's all these stories. And I I really do wish that there was within beauty school some kind of therapist training on how to not take it all on.
Yep.
And maybe it just comes with time and
Yep.
practice. I feel like I've gotten good about protecting my energy, still
Yep.
being like empathetic
Yep.
and there for my guest when they're going
Mhm.
through it and feeling for them. Like I'll
Yep.
cry with my guest still,
Yep.
but making sure that I'm able to leave it at the door.
Yep.
So when I go into my home with my family and my kids, I'm not bringing it home with them.
Yep.
So yeah, I just feel like maybe it's not even just in the hair industry, it's any service industry.
Yep.
person to person
Yep.
when you have those conversations. So 10 years ago, you're saying that you did have a harder time with it.
Yeah.
So it just
Yeah.
came with practice.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And I think as you learn, as you go through hard things, you realize I'm not in control. Like we feel like, I mean, I remember when my kids were infants and I'm like literally checking their breathing all
Yeah.
night because I felt like I have to be in control of keeping this human alive like every
Yes.
second. And eventually you get to the point where you're like, I'm not even sleeping. Like I am
No.
not in control of this. I'm not in charge of life or
No.
death. And I
Yes.
have to let God take this.
Because that's just our ego.
Yeah.
Thinking
Yep.
that we have all this control in the world, like, I can fix this.
Yep.
No, I am just me.
Yep.
I can't fix it. I can listen, I can be here, but I can't carry it. Yeah. Okay, so you have gone to therapy yourself.
Yes.
Yes. And then for the person who isn't quite ready for therapy yet, because I have a lot of people in my life. I know people who just aren't, not that they don't believe in therapy, but I think a lot of people have this idea that therapy is just talk therapy.
Yep.
And a lot of people are like, I have my spouse I can talk to. I have friends that I can talk to. And I get that.
Yep.
But I think people need to understand that there's more to it than that.
Yep.
So if somebody isn't quite ready for therapy yet, or maybe just isn't in a place where it's accessible, because obviously it's not cheap.
Yep.
What are some practical tools or habits that you could recommend to help start that healing process at home? Whether it's working through trauma, regulating their nervous system, or just not feeling like themselves, what are a few things someone can try right now to begin moving forward?
I think even just simple things of moving your body and breathing and recognizing, like, I don't think when I started all this, I recognized how much just breathing can calm down your nervous system, like taking a few deep breaths in the car before you get out or when you wake up in the morning and just starting with simple things like that. There's so many good books out there to read to even help you on that journey. And I think of, I don't know if you've heard of the Daily Grace Company, but they do a lot of faith-based mental health books. And they're like really short, like little devotional type books where they have questions that you answer and just working through anxiety, depression, grief, all of those things. So those are really good resources for people that are like, I want to integrate faith and mental health, and I'm not sure where to start with that. And a lot of those books are great resources. And realizing like our goal with therapy is not to judge or shame or any of those things. Like our goal is like, how do we come alongside you and give you hope for the future to see like, God has a plan and a purpose for your life. Like he wants good things for you. And how do we get there, even through the hard things, how do we see the glimmers? How do we see those little things that God's doing even through really, really dark times?
Yeah. And are there any other forms of therapy that you offer? So I know you do ART.
Yep.
You do talk therapy.
Yep.
What are some other actionable therapies that you offer within your practice?
Yep. So oftentimes you won't necessarily notice this while I'm doing therapy with you, but while we're doing talk therapy, we're oftentimes using CBT tenets like cognitive behavioral therapy. That's like, how do we change your thought process? How do we change the intrusive thoughts that are coming in? Are those cognitive distortions that are coming up, or is that truth that's coming up? Acceptance and commitment therapy, a type of therapy where we're like, how do we accept the things that happen in our life? Because we can't necessarily change that, whether it's death, whether it's aging, whether it's health issues. Like at some point we have to come to a point where we have to accept like, this is my life and how do I make the best of what is my life, Yeah. So just different tenets that we put into talk therapy that maybe aren't as specific as ART. ART is very specific. We sit, we have the light bar, very strict protocol, but the rest of them I would say are more things that we just
are
use
integrated
through.
in.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So within talk therapy, you're still using different tools.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
You learn something new every day. I've done, I think it's cognitive therapy, or I think that's what it is, where I learn like breathing exercises, tools.
Yep.
Is that what cognitive therapy is?
Sometimes they call it cognitive. Sometimes they'll call it somatic. So
Okay.
like breathing, meditation,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
And I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah.
But it got to the point where it's like I had done so many therapy sessions and I kind of learned the tools. And
Yeah.
it was just like, all
Yeah.
right, bye. Like
Yeah.
I learned what I needed,
Yeah.
right? There was
Yep.
like only so far she could take me.
Yeah.
And then that's when I found A.R.T.
Awesome.
Yeah. Pause for a second, because not all hair salons are created equal. At Hustle and Heart, we're all about clean beauty, no harsh chemicals, no toxic color, just intentional products, sustainable practices, and hair that actually feels like you. Whether it's extensions, color, or real solutions for hair loss, it's never just an appointment here. It's an experience. Come feel the difference at Hustle and Heart Salon, where your beauty routine gets the upgrade it deserves. Learn more at hustleandheartsalon.com. Okay, so you've told me before that you love helping people find glimmers of hope,
Yep.
even in their darkest seasons. So what does that look like in your life? And how do you hold on to those glimmers when you're walking through something heavy yourself?
Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes it's knowing like God oftentimes works through the hardest things. Like if nothing was ever hard in our life, what would we look for God for? Why would we feel like we need God? Why would we feel like we need a savior, you know?
Mhm.
And so knowing like God has worked through all of these hard times and oftentimes brings us closer to him, and he does provide for us. And I have seen him show up, whether it's paying bills or saving relationships or restoring marriages, or
Mhm.
there's just so many different ways that we see him provide. And it's just those everyday little things that we're not
Yeah.
always looking for. You know, sometimes it's getting the parking spot when you're running
Yes.
late. Sometimes it's like getting the free coffee when you go through the drive-through and you're like, I just need something quick, and someone buys it for you, and realizing like God is in all the little
Yeah.
things. He does care.
It's
But
just paying attention to them.
yep.
Like those little God moments,
Yep.
recognizing when they do happen. It's not just luck.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. There's someone listening right now, I'm sure, who feels like they are at the end of their rope. Maybe they're grieving, maybe their marriage is struggling, maybe their nervous system is just maxed out like mine was. If you could speak directly to her, what would you want her to hear today?
You're worth it. God loves you, and this season is not going to last forever. It's not going to be this way forever.
So true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that makes me emotional, because it is true.
Mm-hmm.
There is light at the end, even though
Yep.
it feels like there's not.
Yep.
All right. Whew. So before we wrap up, I want to ask you to reflect. If you could go back and speak to the version of yourself that was holding everything together with prayers and duct tape, because we've all been there.
Yep.
Grad school, motherhood, marriage, pain, provision. What would you say to her?
God's got this.
Mhm.
Go take a nap. Because I have been the person my whole life that never sleeps because I've been too busy and too stressed and too
Yes.
worried and carrying too much anxiety. And that's something like the last 3 or 4 years God has really changed in my life. Like, you can sleep. I've
Yes.
got this. You're not changing anything by not sleeping. You're
Right.
laying awake and you're stressed and you're worried, and you can't change anything right now.
No.
So go
Take
to
the
sleep.
nap.
Yep.
Take the nap and don't be ashamed of it.
Yep.
So to end this on a simple note, can you finish the sentence for me? I thought this was kind of fun. One thing I know now that I didn't know back then is
God is always going to provide. He's
yes.
always going to show up.
Yeah.
And it's going to be better than you can imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be beautiful.
Yep.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Where can people find you?
So my website is newmerciestherapy.com, and you can find me there. There's a contact form.
Okay.
I also have a Facebook page. You can look me up there. But
Perfect.
yeah.
Yay. Awesome. All right. So Alissa, thank you for being here. But more than that, thank you for being a safe space for me and for so many others. You live out your calling with so much heart, and your story reminds us that healing isn't always instant, but it's always possible. To the woman listening, if you're tired, if you're grieving, if you started to believe that healing isn't for you, I hope this episode gently reminded you that God sees you and He's still showing up. If you're curious about ART or want to learn more about Alissa's practice, I'll link everything in the show notes. And if this conversation resonated with you, please share it with someone else who might need it, or leave a review so more women can find this space. We'll see you next time on With My Whole Heart. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Your time is valuable, and I'm honored you spent it here. I hope something in this conversation met you right where you are. If it stirred something in your spirit or spoke to your heart, I'd truly love to hear about it. My DMs are always open. I love connecting with you. And as you go, just remember, you're not walking through this life alone. Until next time, stay grounded, keep showing up, and keep leaning into the purpose that's been placed on your heart. I'll be right here, cheering you on with my whole heart.